Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. Hello, Otterites. This is episode 193.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis, sitting in the captain's chair for some reason this time. I'm not sure how that happened.
You volunteered.
I guess I did, didn't I? Dang,
Yes.
how do I keep doing that?
I almost did, but you did. So.
That's okay, so okay.
Well, Francis hasn't captained an episode in a bit.
Well,
That's
it just
true.
kind of
Yeah,
works
I
out
had-
that
It's
way.
been
I had a
3 or
bunch the
4.
last time,
Yeah, you
yeah.
had several. Then I was kind of on the schedule to do both of the April episodes, but thought that's kind of selfish.
You know,
And so,
well, you know, we
Francis
can all,
take this
any
one.
of us can do a code of honor at any time. As a general rule, we're always, you know, that
Well-
kind of blends things around. And
I think at one point we thought whoever hosts should do Code of Honor.
yeah, that makes some sense.
So
yeah.
since you are hosting
I am
today
hosting this
here
time.
at
Oh, yes,
Studio
we
F
did not mention that
in the last episode. Yes, we
Yeah,
did
that's
Studio F
Hanging out at
Studio F.
Studio F, Johnny's game room down the hall from Reed's office, Reed's lab,
next door to the entrance to the portal to the entrance. That negative zone.
to the negative zone.
That's right. Well, I think we're alone here today, so hopefully we won't hear the flush from Annihilus in the next room, should it happen. But I think we're all good with that. I'm hoping
So-
anyway.
But Code of Honor.
Code of Honor. That's right. Yeah. You know, we're in the midst of our long reach, shall we say, through the revolution, through that time. So we're going to kind of tailor our.
It's a reach back through time.
That's right.
Not a reach around.
Not a reach around.
Not a
That's
reach
right.
around.
That's right. So we're going to talk a little bit about. We're supposedly, just as we're kind of dotting things a little bit around as we were show prepping it. We picked these quotes just a few minutes before we hit the record button. You know, we don't spend a lot of time on that. Most of our thinking out loud happens as we're doing it for the episode, for you listeners, for your benefits, so you can catch up on our wisdom as it occurs in real time. So that's one of the charms
Yes.
of Snakes and
Well,
Otters.
Very little of what we do is pre-planned. I mean, the last episode, Martin had a plan. We hit some points on it, but it went in wild directions.
Like I said, I built a scaffolding, and you guys finished off the walls.
Yeah, it was very different, and it was not what we expected originally.
Let's get some sheetrock up in this place.
That's right.
It looks good. Let's caulk it. That's right.
That's close enough.
That's right. Okay, but I'm going to jump right in, folks. Since
Oh, you're going to go first.
yeah, I think I'm going to go first.
Captain's prerogative.
Captain's prerogative. It's just just to kind of lay it out, because as we were discussing around, I'm going to choose one from Thomas Paine, which, when it comes to thought leaders,
I don't think we've done.
we've not
Paine.
done him yet,
And Paine
he
was
is one of the major thought leaders of the revolution. He articulated things in ways nobody else was ever able
the
to.
revolution and the constitutional
The
period.
Constitution. That's correct. He was
He was the motivational speaker of the time.
very much so, and his wisdom comes down to us much today as it was from the time, and he's still revered as even though at the time he was considered quite a malcontent in many respects, and a revolutionary when that didn't mean something good in this context. Future generations.
Boy, how much of a malcontent are you if the entire nation of malcontents thinks you're a malcontent?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. He had quite the reputation.
And he never had a successful political career.
No, he was
Unlike Hamilton, is kind of his buddy that worked on the Federalist Papers with him.
Yeah, he was essentially a propagandist.
Yeah.
Back when propagandist was a good thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, in its most basic sense of the word,
Yes.
that's what he did, and he was damn good at it
A
because.
polemicist.
Okay,
Oh, yeah, that's a better
we can do
way to
that.
put
We
it.
can do
Not a
that.
propaganda, a polemicist.
Well, yeah, because he
Because he's
lays.
constructing arguments to convince you of something,
That's correct.
not just extolling the virtues of something.
Very good. I'm telling you, I am. Oh, you're exactly
Yes.
right.
From a theological standpoint, you would call him a good apologist.
Yes, exactly, and he's able to convince people of something they know in their hearts but haven't quite committed to yet. I think that's one way of putting it. That's there has to be the grain of success in there. But he was enormously successful. His pamphlet, Common Sense, is still talked about as one of the greatest polemics of all time in history. He's right up there with some of the great thinkers, in thousands of years. His clarity is so good. And that's one of the reasons I was looking for who I wanted to talk about before I decided what it was.
Yeah.
And
I
Paine,
just like that we managed to work in another $10 word.
yeah. Hey, whatever gets us to the party. That's correct. But it's so much fertile ground to pull from. I mean, it wasn't just about. I could have pulled things that were directly related to the revolution and the cause at the time, but I decided to go a little bit broader because that's what we do: a pointless discussion of eternal questions. And this one is one I think that we can chew on in a little different way. It will not. I don't think we'll talk about this so much in context of the revolution, although that may come up a little. But I'd like us to think broader on this if we would. And here's the quote. It's not that long. Reputation is what men and women think of us. Character is what God and angels know of us.
Oh, that's excellent.
See, I knew you guys would love that.
That's very much within the thinking of men at that time. That could have been a Washington. He said
that also could have been a Martin Luther King too.
Yeah,
yeah. Well, people have said variations on that for some time. We would know it today as character is what you do when nobody's watching.
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah, it's what I like the fact that he's juxtaposing the word think about reputation and know about character. Mm-hmm. So one is an absolute, and the other is malleable.
Opinion. Yeah, right. All thinking is opinion of one sort or another when you really get down to it.
Right.
But he means it in the most base form.
That's correct. Exactly.
Because it's reputation. Because it's shallow. Reputation is shallow.
Yeah, it's based
the surface.
Yeah, it's based upon primary data or secondary data, or even much further than that. But at a one snippet point in time. Maybe you have multiple points if you're...
It's entirely sensory data.
That's correct. That's
what you can see, hear, touch, smell, and taste, although hopefully there's not a whole lot of that smelling and tasting that goes into your reputation.
Right. And it's also very fungible. It's very malleable because...
Yes, it can change.
It can change, but there's always a grain of truth. Even the worst awful rumors about people... There's a reason they happen. They're usually not created whole cloth. They're a few points removed from something that was said or done that could be misinterpreted in a certain way, or the absence of something that gives people a reason. That's a fascinating study of how do rumors and character assassinations in their fullest form, how do they happen? How do they start? I'm of the opinion rarely. It's like every lie to be good has to have a grain of truth in it. That's
the best comedy is based on reality,
right? So you have to. It's rare that somebody will make up something that sticks, mind you, that didn't have something that was somehow believable.
Well, as Dan Rather would say, has a truthiness.
Truthiness to it, yeah, absolutely. Which is kind of amazing when you think.
Which, although when it comes to that kind of truthiness, it often is that's made up entirely.
Well, sure, and that's what he's kind of. That's what he was. Rather was kind of talking about. He recognized. I don't know if he recognized it, but he zapped into something about the entire media journalism role is that we're not always involved in exactly the truth. We're going to get close and see what happens sometimes, and sometimes we fill in the blanks completely wrong.
Job, yeah.
That's right. If there's a sensationalistic aspect to it,
but if their desire, that this whole idea, well, we got to be on the right side of history. Well, that starts with the truth, though. It doesn't start with your feelings. It starts with the truth, real truth. One of the things I find interesting about that quote too is, when you talk the difference between reputation and character is within your control.
Yes.
Reputation often is not.
Almost always is not.
Well, that's correct. I mean, you can work hard on your reputation. I think we all do.
Right. I mean, a person of character has some control over other people's perceptions, but not always.
I would say less over their perceptions as what they have perceptions about.
What you're exposing
over the primary data they're judging you on.
Yes.
That you do have control over that.
Yes, that's your character.
Not their interpretation,
because. Even so, what comes with reputation is not just the primary data, because almost always the primary data is I would say primary data is not even primary in the sense that reputation is based not just on what people observe.
Right.
It's what they think they observe.
Yes, very true.
How they feel about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And also importantly, what others in their circle feel about it.
That's correct. You have to reach a certain critical mass of numbers in order for a reputation to be solidified, good or ill. All it takes is enough people feeling the same way.
Right. I would note that reputation, even though it can change, rarely changes for the better. Yeah. Whatever you start at is almost always your high point.
Well, yeah.
Not always.
The old saying, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation, but seconds to ruin it.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's an element of peer pressure to it, as you said, Robert, of, well, all these other people perceive that about person X.
It must be true.
Yeah, I have to perceive it then as well.
Right. At that point, perception not becomes reality, but it becomes truth because it's almost forced upon people.
Right.
It takes the rare, strong person to say, I know you all see it this way, I see it differently, and I'm sticking with what I've got.
Right.
Yes,
now,
groupthink is a powerful force.
One of the things that strikes me about this, my take on this quote, is that this is the internal versus the external, which is what you were started out with.
Yeah.
But it also reminds me of that old be, do, have thing I've talked about in episodes past. Mm-hmm. That you have to be something before you can do something, before you can have something, or you have to do something. Whichever one you want to pick first is fine because it's a circle, and they kind of form one another. Sometimes your reputation can influence your character as well, because your reputation may be such that you give into it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Whether it be good or ill.
Especially once you reach a certain pinnacle of celebrity.
Yes.
It becomes, and we all know of the stories of the certain celebrities that in their public face they lean into that persona, whereas otherwise, Robin Williams is a really good one because he would lean into that a lot, and it eventually became tiresome for him. And most people didn't realize until after his tragic death that he was never really that person. He was always a very lonely and confused and just depressed individual. Both and medically supports that as what data we've been taught, and just his that manicness was always just something he portrayed. It was not really him, and that's just reputation and character.
I think that's more reputation than character.
It is, yes.
Because I don't think character really has anything to do with that part, which just shows that reputation and character are not always related at all.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because again, it's perception. That's something that we reputation is almost always something we project onto others. It is almost never something
we try to. Are we always successful with it?
Well, yes, because you are projecting your image. That's what you see.
Right.
I'm not saying that doesn't mean that when we project a reputation on someone, that they are forced to take it on.
Right. Reputation
is what we perceive that person to be, not what they really are.
Right.
Sometimes they're in alignment, but not always.
We kind of wish for that. We are kind of
well, yes.
We're always gratified when we find one where it really is what you see is what you get.
Or what we think. I mean, again, I would say that almost always character and reputation, even when we believe they are in alignment, we're missing 90%. Character is the tip of the iceberg that is the person. Or reputation is the tip of the iceberg that is the person.
Right.
Character is all that hidden stuff.
Under the waterline.
Yes, under the waterline.
As Payne would say, character is a no.
It's what God and the angels know, as he says.
Right.
I know
my
character.
It's the secret heart.
That's right, and it's objective. It's truth.
But I can't always know my reputation because I'd have to understand what other people think or care. And you don't always know what your reputation is.
You can get a general idea, I think, for most normal people. If you have many interactions over time, with multiple
people.
Well,
but if I like dogs more than people, I might not know what people think.
No, and that's true. That's right.
Dogs are more reliable.
In order to get have a good barometer of your reputation, you need to have essentially lots of diverse data over time.
Well, and the question really becomes,
and it can be difficult data to gather.
Yes. Well, the question also becomes should you even care what your reputation is? Now, yes, to a certain point you should, because you don't want to be someone who causes scandal or to be the object of scandal if you can help it, just morally and ethically speaking, because that can harm your ability to interact with others. Mm. But generally speaking, reputation it's a dangerous thing. Because far too often in this age of social media and quote-unquote influencers, I'm using the air quotes here, listeners, reputation is not just a false flag, so to speak, or a blind alley, or any other metaphor you want to use. It can be a very dangerous thing because it can be something that one seeks for ignoble purposes.
Even crafts for such.
Yeah.
In case of the influencer, that reputation is...
You craft your reputation for profit.
Right. Which, in a way, tells you what your character is.
You craft your character in order to treat others as you would like to be treated yourself.
One would hope.
As Washington would undoubtedly say, worry about your character and reputation takes care of itself.
Right.
I would think so, yeah. I would think so. Yeah. Nevertheless, there are some that don't even bother with that. They simply work on reputation.
Well, character and reputation...
The influencers you speak of.
Yeah. Most people, this is not even something they even concern themselves with. It takes an incredibly high degree of self-awareness to even be concerned with it, to know that there's a difference, much less be concerned with it. And I think that as technology and media has overtaken the world, character is not something that is as important as it was even when we were young.
Yes.
Reputation is everything.
Yeah, perception is reality.
Exactly.
This is essentially what
I mean, political campaigns, social campaigns, all of it rests on perception and reputation, not character. Which is ironically and sadly the opposite of Martin Luther King's
But then again,
speech.
is character even knowable at that level of is true character?
Because I mean, you can be a person of bad character without actually having overtly injured someone.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the subtlety that's lost on the modern young person anyway.
Well, and even what an injury is different.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got an example on that. I'd love to...
Well, I mean, you talk about influencers. Again,
that's where I'm thinking
they're concerned about that online reputation, whereas what you don't see about them is they might be really a horrible person.
Right. And they might also actually be a really good person in their day-to-day lives, and they adopt this persona to make money.
Yeah.
I mean, it can go both ways.
Again, that shallowness, that reputation being that little bit of the iceberg that's above the water. The character is what's underneath the water.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're talking about, for example, I do not remember which crime show we were watching. It may have been. It wasn't Elementary because it was a recent one about the influencer who was stalked and murdered. And all she did was she did TikTok videos about pottery, and they had thousands upon thousands of views, and she ends up deciding to stop to marry a guy that she's fallen in love with, and she's just done this as a side hustle essentially. But she's making serious money on it. It's like I don't know if it's on OnlyFans. It doesn't use
probably
that
not
word.
OnlyFans,
but it's one of those type things because they spoke about it that way.
Could be Patreon or something like that.
I don't remember. I think it was faux. I don't think it was made up. I don't think they used a real one. And she's essentially stalked and murdered or kidnapped. I think she survives by this a stalker that can't stand that she's going away because she's become his whole world. And it's not sexual at all. And yet, for whatever reason, that reputation bore no in fact, it was a hobby that she was very good at. And yet, some broken individual ties into that in a sexual, under the waterline type way to do that. And I'm kind of wondering here about, is reputation as harmless a thing or as personal a thing as we would like it to be, as Paine would have understood it to be, in this day and age where where everything is pornified. Everything is pornified.
Yes.
And that's essentially what they didn't say it. They let the viewer interpret it, but that's what I do. Basically, the guy has an unhealthy sexual fixation upon this pretty girl who does not do sexual acts.
It's the objectification.
That's exactly it.
Everything.
Everything. That's
yes.
right. And that is, I think that's exactly where I want to go. Is how does reputation even a thing that hasn't been co-opted completely by the objectification that the modern world has brought to us today? Is everything objectified now?
I would say pretty much. The way I like to distinguish between the two, character's who you are.
Yes.
Reputation is what you do, or what others see you do.
Right, yes. Uh-huh.
And then, of course, what meaning they give that. So this guy sees a pretty woman who does videos. And she's probably, if she's young, she's pretty, she's probably got a good figure. Again, because she's been objectified. So I'm just guessing that's what.
That's correct. That's right. She's very charming. She's a nice. And
she's attractive.
Yes, that's right.
The point, physically as well as probably personality.
Right.
So there is going to be an element that will objectify that into perverse fantasies.
Yes.
And it's not that necessarily that everything has become objectified, but that because everything is visible to everybody, there is somebody who will objectify something negatively, and they will see that. So the opportunity to have something negatively objectified, which is almost always redundant, is always there. As soon as you put something on the internet.
Right.
Now, you may not have enough of a reach for it to happen to you.
Yeah.
But it could.
If the numbers get large enough. And they don't really have to get larger than one. It's just whether or not that one is that one guy. Right, yeah.
But yes, so everything is not necessarily objectified by default, but everything has that as a possibility by default.
Right. Martin, anything on that?
Nope. I think we're ready to move on.
All right.
I suspected as much.
Wow, that was really good. That was a great philosophical discussion on that.
That's what I wanted.
That was awesome.
That's what I wanted to go with.
That was awesome. Very good, Francis.
Right. I hope I didn't take up too much time, but
well, this is one that can go a little bit longer than others, I think, because we always spend a long time on the first one. It seems, especially when we let Francis go first. Francis tends to do the bigger explanation about what he's going. He talks more about more than us.
The setup is.
He talks more with a setup than you and I do, and that's just your nature.
Yes. Speaking of nature, it's time, Nature Boy. Francis hands it over to Martin to lay it on us.
Well, I think we've got a little bit of a challenge for Robert to hammer all of this together, because I'm going to.
I got a quote that I think can do it.
Pretty significantly different direction here.
Ooh, good.
So in January 1780, the middle of the war.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the war. Washington writes a letter to Elbridge Gerry. I believe that's how the name is pronounced.
Probably Jerry.
Jerry, I'd say.
Elbridge Gerry.
Gerry.
Also a noted patriot who becomes involved in the government later. And the quote is, "There is nothing so likely to produce peace as to be well prepared to meet an enemy." Now, Jerry is I believe at this time, a member of Congress, or at least influential, has been a member of Congress, the Continental Congress, and Washington's talking about supplies, money. But the kernel of truth there is, if we are prepared, if we have our supplies, if we have our arms, if we are funded, the British take us seriously. If we skimp and don't fund this army, the British have no incentive to treat us as anything but a rabble. And rabbles are shot down. So he's saying here that not only does peace, but our survival basically depends on we've got to be fully prepared. Money, arms, supplies, shoes, coats, everything. This army has to be supplied. Otherwise, the British will simply attack. They have no motivation to then seek any kind of peace, any kind of arrangement to grant our independence.
Well, it's a great point. This is not the point that you're making specifically, but a great point about most wars is that they are won not just in the trenches, but probably before that in the logistics.
Yeah.
If you have excellent logistics, your chances of winning are much greater.
Right.
And that's kind of what he's talking about here, but it's not just the if we are well prepared when we get on the battlefield. To me, this is a timeless quote in that, nobody goes up to Mike Tyson to punch him in the face, unless you're a freaking idiot,
Right.
Or Evander Holyfield or whoever current big name boxer, because those are the last guys that I know. But nobody.
Yes.
Unless you're in prison and you need to make a statement, nobody finds the biggest guy on the block to punch him in the face, because you just don't do that. That's a recipe for getting your butt kicked.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting because he's talking about a specific moment in time and talking about influencing Congress. But this idea, this notion that's built into this quote, really becomes a thread of American history, all the way up through Ronald Reagan and Peace Through Strength. That if we put the funding into readiness, if we make our military ready, we can bring the Soviets to the peace table.
Yeah,
if we're not ready, if we're falling apart militarily, we can't get the Soviets to the table. They have no motivation.
No incentive.
There's no incentive. So we're not going to have real peace. Peace through strength. Peace through there's nothing so likely to produce peace as to be well prepared to meet an enemy.
Yeah,
we forget that lesson at our peril.
Right. This quote is the epitome of foreign relations in the 20th century from the very beginning. 19th century less so, because we were mostly engaged in affairs on the continent. We were not a world power yet. But now, with not just the ability to project power across the globe, but also just in general, the globe is much smaller because of communications and what have you, the internet and everything else. Every time we were not well prepared, we were embroiled in a war we were not ready for. Whether it be World War I, World War II, Korea especially, we drastically downsized in the wake of World War II, and we're woefully unprepared. Just 5 years later, we were driven literally to a small portion of South Korea into one tiny little area after the Chinese invaded from the north and joined the North Koreans, and the South was pushed down to
that occurred even before the Chinese intervention.
Was that before? I was thinking it was after. Okay.
I believe, yes, the Pusan Perimeter is what it's called.
Yeah.
And the famous, we're stuck here, we can't break out, and MacArthur decides to invade on the whole other side of the peninsula at Incheon to come in behind that. That's all, I think, prior to Chinese intervention.
Okay, I was thinking
Chinese don't intervene until we cross the parallel and have invaded North Korea. But Seoul changes hands like 3 times early in the war, 4 times, something crazy like that.
But the point is, though, we were not equipped, even just 5 years after winning the greatest war in history.
You're right. And again, I talk about the military falling apart in Reagan.
prior to Reagan.
Yeah, I mean that's only that's a 10-year period too.
Yeah,
I mean that's post Vietnam. That's 1973. That whole period before Reagan really starts the military buildup, the military's in shambles.
Right. Well, it's most evident with the aborted attempt to rescue the hostages in Iran.
Right.
That's, I think, that more than anything else showed the American people, holy crap, we are in a sad state of affairs.
Right. We are weak,
and we do not want to be there.
And the world sees us
even the peaceniks who did not wish the war realized, well, we can't do that, can we?
Well, I don't know about that so much.
I know, that's projection on my part.
Yeah, I think that is extreme projection on your part because that's an ideological stance.
That's correct.
Not an observation. The Great Middle would not make that observation. They would already see, well, no, we have to be strong because the Great Middle, especially then, would have been much more traditional than today. It would much been
what Nixon called the silent majority.
Yes. And that silent majority could vote, back in that day, could vote Democrat one election, could vote Republican the next. The Great Middle is no longer, is much smaller than it was back then.
Yeah, but military...
But you're right, that is the epitome of weakness where we were.
Yeah, it was. You were talking about the military, 76, 77, 78, it was just not ready.
Well, and the people had enough. We were in Vietnam for 10 years.
Yeah.
Or more, really, from the very beginning of the first advisors that went over. And they were just tired of it. It was a war that we did not win. Well, technically it wasn't a war, but it was a conflict that we did not win. We absolutely lost that.
Yeah.
And that was a humiliating thing for America. We did not want to have anything to do with the military after that.
Yeah, we just wanted to forget about it.
Right. Which is the wrong thing to do.
Correct, that's right. Washington himself said, in time of peace, prepare for war. And that's Cicero too, but, Washington.
Right, and that's a very important observation, that threat, again, we're talking about Reagan threading it all the way back to Washington. Washington and his era, they're threading it all the way back to Rome.
Yeah.
Because they're heavily influenced by the classics, by the Latin and Greek stuff and the histories of Rome, that they used Roman noms de plume when they wrote these polemics about convincing people the Constitution is the right thing to do. So I just love that quote.
It's interesting.
It's a very Martin quote.
It is, but I didn't interpret it that way at all. I really didn't.
Really?
No. I see it. It's exactly correct. I'm not doubting it, but I was reading that more as we have to meet them on the battlefield, because this is during the war when he writes this.
Right, again, it's 1780.
And it's very much a pre-Civil War, pre-American way of war, pre-Grant,
yes,
where you go in and you must destroy the enemy's ability to make war. That is nowhere near this. This is the continental Napoleonic type of two forces meet on the battlefield von Clausewitz, even though I hadn't written it yet. Their two forces meet on the battlefield till one of their wills breaks, and then you sue for peace. That is the shortest route to victory.
Again, that's what he's talking about.
We have to be able to meet them in honorable battle, or we will never come to the table.
Right. Well, I think that's exactly what Martin was explaining earlier about. We have to be well fed. We've got to have proper clothing.
All of that is correct.
All of that's tactics.
But he's defining peace very narrowly here.
And not a victory that obliterates the enemy.
That's correct.
But a victory that brings the enemy to the table. And we can have peace.
That's correct. In other words, I would qualify that word peace as honorable peace. In other words, a true peace where we negotiate as equals and agree these are the terms. Because without that, we are subject to full destruction.
Yep.
Right, and there are plenty of other quotes that talk about that. Patrick Henry had one very much like that it is basically, this might have been a Washington quote, this particular version, but it was basically we have to conquer or die.
That's right, because if they are weak enough where they can be, the army is basically destroyed, then the punitive consequences upon the civilian population would be potentially
yeah
extreme.
Right, we either hang together or we'll all hang
Well,
separately.
yeah, and they're going back to Rome for this because that was the Roman way.
Yes.
You go in and you destroy the resistance and you crucify them where everybody can see them. I mean, that was 101.
Yeah.
I mean, Spartacus is just the easy one. They fill the Appian Way with crosses all the way. You will not do this again, and that's how they subjugated, and that's what Washington is fearing. Unless we can bring them to the table,
right?
As
the only way to
equal
do that,
force is an equal force.
Is exactly to be an equal, to be well prepared to do battle. They'll respect us enough to come to the table, and we will win what we want: our independence.
That's correct. Because ultimately, he knew if they came to the table, we're too much trouble otherwise.
Yeah.
As long as they can get away saving face,
and reestablish the trade,
we'll get away with this. They'll be fine with that.
Yeah.
Well, it's very
They did not want to. It goes back to the understanding they did not want to conquer us, and they did not want to destroy us.
They didn't want to burn the joint down.
That's correct. Which is different in other conflicts.
Yeah,
of the Civil War in particular.
It's amazing Washington's farsightedness here. His prescience, that understanding of what he was involved in.
Well, that's true.
Incredible.
It applies 200 years later, although Washington would have probably never even thought that that's what he was doing. He was working in the moment. But his wisdom was so spot on, we were able to apply that in a relative peacetime.
Actually, I would say while he may not have thought of in terms of, 200 years later they can use this quote.
Yeah.
No, I think absolutely this is, in his mind,
They were writing for posterity.
Universal principle.
Yeah.
And yet,
yes.
It can be, and it often is, but it is not always universal because Grant, in particular, shows that no, that doesn't apply. We can't. That's not how we're going to operate. We have to operate differently because the resistance is such they must be conquered, and that's. But then again, that's a different, and that's just. I'm just saying.
Well, see, I think that what you're talking about, the conquering versus the prevailing, you didn't really give an alternative to the conquering. I think that has nothing to do with this. That's how you prosecute the war, but this is, to me, this is less about how you achieve your end goals. This is the preparation stage. I mean, literally, he's talking about be prepared.
Well, yes, but
if you are better prepared, you have to be destroyed.
Well, not necessarily.
For the other side to win.
He's thinking strategically.
Right, and that is strategically.
And again, he's talking about an external enemy.
Yes.
So that,
at the time of the Civil War, that was an external enemy.
Absolutely, they were seen that way. And I can't help but thinking about Alexander Stevens and all the others who came at the end, and it shows so great in the movie Lincoln, they were thinking this way: we're going to come to the table and offer you peace, so this ends, because that's what we all want. It's going on for too long.
Yeah,
thinking that they could be this equal, that could get what they wanted, and everybody, it's a win-win. Misunderstanding that Grant has totally thrown this book away. We will conquer you because of, and here's the linchpin that made that different, the issue of slavery. We will not tolerate slavery to exist. Therefore, you must be conquered and subjugated and changed. And that's ultimately what happened.
Yeah.
Because of the institution of slavery. If it weren't for that, Stevens coming to the table like he did, that it would have ended like Washington would have wanted.
And it very much that became part of the American character too.
That's right.
We're going to bomb you flat and rebuild you in our image, Japan and Germany.
Exactly, because they learned that from Grant.
Yeah.
And
that's the only way to really have peace is to eliminate
the ability to make war. Yeah, their ability
for war.
That too.
We're going to crush you, and then that way, when we rebuild you in our image, there's no more fascism. There's no more militarism.
There's no more slavery.
No more slavery.
Yeah, and that which is about you that we cannot abide.
Both pieces become part of the American character of, okay, if we got to go to war, we're crushing you, but hopefully we'll be so prepared for war, no one will challenge us.
So you're suggesting that the Washington is the foundation upon which Grant built and changed and moved forward.
They're both strains.
I think you guys are projecting a little bit.
Okay, that's fair.
I think because you're looking back with 250 years of history, trying to trace a straight line, and I think what this quote and what Washington is talking about here is it's more fundamental. Mm-hmm. Okay, so first of all, you're talking about two different kinds of conflict.
Yes.
The Civil War, the American Civil War, more than any other Civil War, was an existential war. Okay?
Who are we?
Yes, who are we? Who are we as a people? Do we tolerate slavery?
Right.
Do we have that inherent respect for the dignity of the human person? Right. Had to work it in somehow.
That's right.
Whereas something like the Revolution is less about who we are as a people. Yes, there is that a little bit in the sense that, well, are we British subjects or are we Americans? But that's a lot less existential.
That's a shade of gray.
That's a shade of gray.
They're similar to each other.
And I don't think I don't think you can draw a straight line from this to Grant throwing out the book of no, we have to conquer you. Because yes, this is in a time when the whole idea. Granted, this is 100 years before von Clausewitz.
Yeah.
But this is in a time when wars were fought in much smaller engagements, and they were army to army. There was no raising of cities unless you held a siege. But you didn't hold sieges in America because they weren't walled cities. You didn't have to have a siege.
Yeah, von Clausewitz would have recognized this.
Well, he would have recognized it, yes.
They're thinking out of the same playbook.
Yeah, but it's less of a, this is to draw my enemy to the negotiating table. I think this is less about that than it is to say, if we are strong enough, if we are so prepared, we don't even have to go to war.
Well, that's Sun Tzu.
Right, that's what it would eventually become.
Well, no, I think that's part of what he's talking about here.
He's channeling Sun Tzu. The best way to fight is not to be there.
Right.
You arrange the circumstances so the battle never happens and you win.
But he is saying we have to have what we need to fight the war. But I think this is also because this is the way these guys thought. This is, I think, a foundational. It's going forward. We have to be united. We have to be strong. Otherwise, we invite
because
being attacked.
Here we are, we're a brand new nation. Who knows why don't the Germans or the Spanish invade us or whatever? We've got to be ready to survive.
Right.
That's how we survive long term. We've got to be ready.
Well, and that is ultimately. I'm glad that we kind of went this way because that is Sun Tzu. That's exactly what these guys are channeling.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much a Sun Tzu kind of quote.
It's exactly that.
But it is, I think the whole idea is bring them to the negotiating table versus an outright conquering. That has nothing to do with this quote to me. It's
either works.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think, and again, as a development, how we get from there to the Civil War, and where yes, there is a development there, but I think this quote has nothing. Well, personally, I see nothing to do.
I'm projecting Washington as we know him to be different from Grant as we know him, which may or may not be the case.
Well, I think you're projecting Grant back on Washington.
Perhaps.
And I just personally, I don't see it.
Yeah. So I mean, I want to stress again that I think there's a lot here.
Oh, absolutely.
And again, that shows that how incredible Washington was. That the Brits, he's just this bumpkin farmer that we had in the militia for a while.
It wasn't really that great to begin with.
Yeah, but
he's okay.
He's a real legitimate thinker,
statesman,
and thinker.
Well, that's true because
then he gets credit for, even as the founder. He's a guy that thinks through things and understands things at multiple levels.
Yeah, because
and that's why this works. It's at those multiple levels. It's in the moment of the only way we're going to have peace is to settle this with the Brits, and the only way we can do that is to be their equals. But then it's also how we protect our fledgling nation in the future is also being prepared.
Yes, because this comes back again over and over. Reagan is the easy, most modern example of all
but
that.
But even,
it's not the only
FDR
absolutely
even understood, no, we're not involved in the war, but boy, we better get ready. We better get ready.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about having 30,000 guys marching with broomsticks in Louisiana, that's not going to cut it.
Right.
We're going to have to get some shit together and be ready to go.
Right.
Get that poop in a group.
Yeah.
Poop in a group. I love that. That's a good one.
Yes, got to have your poop in a group.
Speaking of poop in a group, actually no, but we're going to...
No, this is as far from poop in a group as you can get.
That was a very clumsy segue, Captain.
I know. Well, its absurdity is its brilliance. Let's just leave it that way.
Yes. Let's get our group poop in a group.
That's right. And slide into the bourbon break that we need to be in, because
is its brilliance.
Absolutely.
That's one for the wall right there, man.
I agree. See, yes, we are fecund. We are prolific.
Yeah, keeping in the subject matter, we are fecund.
That's right. Exactly.
All right. So give us that bourbon break.
Now, I think I've told we have drank Old Forester many times.
Yes, it is the current.
It's the current
bourbon of the Snakes and Otters.
Snakes and Otters. That's correct. We've used that, and recently, I think it's only a year or two old. They came up with the Whiskey Rose series, which is what it's all called, with 4 different bourbons, each attached with a year to them. You still have your regular Old Forester. You still have the line extensions, the presidential one, which we've not tried.
Yeah.
Which is kind of on my radar a little bit.
Old Forester Statesman.
That's the one I'm looking for.
Get a hold of, yes.
Yeah, we haven't had that one. We've had the regular one that we've done, but I have recently acquired all 4 of the Whiskey Rose series. Now, we have had 2 of them before. We've had the 1897.
Yep.
And we've had the 1920 Prohibition style, which, daddy, that's, that baby's 115 proof. Everything barks.
That'll put hair on your chest.
That put hair on your chest, that's right.
Put hair on your nipples.
That's right. That was some seriously powerful stuff that we had. Loved them both. We loved them all. I've recently acquired the other 2, and we're sampling one of them now. Now, we'll save the other one for its own kind of showcase, probably one of the next upcoming ones. But this is the first of the 4. The 1870, what they're calling the original batch. This is basically when Mr. Brown comes to town. How'd you like that little rhyme there? And takes over several of the distilleries here in Louisville and blends 3 of them together to kind of figure out what's my Old Forester blend. What is that? And this is called the original batch. And that's what we're all drinking on the rocks here today. Gentlemen, you care to weigh in?
Well, Martin has finished his.
Yeah, you just clinked. Go ahead. Our master taster over here. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, I found it to smooth. It's a high corn, low rye, and I thought it mellow and chocolatey.
Yeah,
with some fruit to it, maybe a little bit of cherry.
Yeah, you described it in the show prep as a chocolate covered cherry, as part of that. Which I'm getting a little chocolate. I'm not getting the cherry. It's a dark amber, and it's a 90 proof. It's got a little roughness to it, but that's, I think, intentional. I think it's very intentional.
You're drinking a whiskey.
Yes.
I don't normally refer to bourbon as a whiskey, even though it is technically.
Yeah.
It's a class unto itself. But you are, because it's, even though it is smooth, you've got that. It's not quite a burn, but in that back of the mouth, the top of the throat.
Yeah.
Where you get that after effect, that lingering bit that is a little sharper.
That's a good word. That's a good word. That's the word. Maybe that's the word I was searching for. It is much sharper, and it's kind
not
of
initially. Well, on the rocks, once you've had the chance for the water to help those flavors bloom, it is, I think, less sharp than it is when you take your first taste.
Well, we all started together at the same time on the rocks, but we all took sips immediately after it was poured.
Yes,
to try to get that chill, but a baseline. I think is a good idea, and it was very much sharper.
Yes,
when we
very
first
front of the mouth.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Yeah. There's a sting to it.
Yeah, Sting. That's a good way to put it.
That's right. That's right. And we're not talking Gordon Sumner, although we like Gordon Sumner. We love Sting and the boys. But that's another subject. We should perhaps do an episode on those guys. But I'm digressing.
Talking about that, we should do an episode on Bloom County.
Absolutely, we
Sting
should.
and the boys would like to have a word with you.
That's exactly right.
The breath you take, every herring you bake. I'll be watching you.
Yeah, but this is. I like this here. I really would love us at some point after we've done them all to kind of maybe put them all together and see if we can take a little bit of a taste test of the 4 and see what we can come up with. We're taking a slow burn at that because bourbon is best enjoyed slow.
Yeah.
Yes.
The 1920 for me is tough to top. I thought the complexity of the flavors was tremendous. This one's a little more straight ahead.
Yeah.
Not as much, I think, as the other one we've tried, the 1897.
1897
was a little bit of that was kind of a spank.
That was the first. Was that the first one after the Bottled and Bond, or was that?
That was the Bottled and Bond.
That was
the first Bottled and Bond. That's right. That's its thing.
That's its. Yeah, I knew that.
So I thought that one was very much a straight ahead, elephant in the room kind of taste. The 1920 is very layered and.
Well, at 115 proof, there's a lot to work with.
Yeah, so there's a lot of flavors there. This one is kind of in the middle. Again, it's high corn, low rye. I really like the it has kind of a polish almost to it.
You would think this,
well done,
as it's branded, would be rougher.
Yeah,
it's kind of like prototypical. You'd think it was that. It's like the original version before we've monkeyed with it.
Yeah, we think of a whiskey. Again, I'm not fond of calling bourbon whiskey, even though that's what it is. Of 1870, you think Rock Gut.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
this is not Rock Gut.
Oh no, this is very polished.
But it's just polished. That's a good, a nice polished finish.
Even the prototypical
chocolate and cherries
is polished.
I'm not getting a whole lot of the chocolate and cherry myself, but yeah, I had a very sweet coffee coming into the morning, so I think I'm a little bit. What's the best word?
Tainted.
That's a good way to put it. I was going to say. That's a good way to put it. There's another word that's a tip of my tongue.
Spoiled, perhaps.
No. Basically, I am misaligned in my taste buds.
Infected?
Perhaps. No. I was thinking more of a mechanical kind of a word, but
we're all doing our Monty Python best to fill in the sentence for you, but we're not.
Yes, but we're not. They're definitely. I do get the sweet. And I do get that as you speak about the rye. I think it definitely has a little bit of There's not a lot of it there, but there's just enough to give it that finish that leaves you a little bit dry.
Yeah.
The rye tends to give you a dry mouth.
A dry mouth. Having just finished mine, there's a little of that. Yeah. I didn't.
That's why I conflate the rye with the type of wines that I don't like, the dry wines.
Yeah.
Because they do the same thing. I don't know if they're called dry wines because of that, but I mean, to me, it just kind of dries out the mouth.
Right. It's the higher alcohol content. Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah. Well, but you know what? That 115 doesn't do that to me.
Interesting. You're right. That's. Let's just say the Prohibition style will be making regular appearances here, I'm sure.
Yeah. But the 1870 original batch, not bad stuff.
No, we knew going in that the bar was pretty high on this one. All the Old Forsters, it's become one of our very favorites. I mean, that and Wild Turkey might be the two that we've had the highest rates on.
I don't know. I still give high ratings to the Basil Hayden.
That's true.
And the Double Oak.
And I'm still right now very much a Monk's Road guy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. After that Weller and the Long Branch we had, which is a Wild Turkey brand, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, Long Branch that's right.
At Maverick's place, I tell you what, that Weller was a phenomenal. I understand why that was a $300 bottle.
That was unexpected. We didn't know, and that's the one he let us drink out of because there are four of them, and wisely so. He knows, you can have some of this one, but you can't touch the other ones. Nobody can touch the other ones.
Right. Well, this one and one of the other labels, he had a spare bottle of them. That's what we were allowed to have. Somebody had another bottle.
Yeah, because some of those things go for a couple $1,000s.
Right.
If you can get them.
Exactly.
So you're right. He had picked those up on a very lucky thing that he was able to get with that. So
he said 3, but that shows 170 that you're looking up there.
Yeah, that's Antique 107 is the one that we
Maybe
had.
it was a different one that was 300, but yeah, it was.
Yeah, because they have different ones at different times, and it's made by the same people that make Blanton's, which we've not done Blanton's because I don't have any, and it's pretty.
You can't find it,
Yeah.
but
Well,
Blanton's is killer.
Well,
I've had
he had a bottle out there, so if we record out at his place, like we've said, we eventually will. That's
Blanton's
probably
is the one that has the super long neck.
That's
and
the
no.
That's the
Blanton's
Willet.
That's the Willet. That's right.
That's Willet pot still.
Yeah.
Blanton's has always got the racehorse on.
It's the round
The
barrel.
Yes, the
like,
yes.
and he had one of those too.
Yes.
And
I knew it was one of those really distinctive bottles.
I'm sure we could easily, especially if we record out at his place and have him as the guest, which we need to do for next Super Juke, which we've already been talking about. We can make that our sampling because that's kind of some high end stuff.
Well, give me for our next Hoopa Jube
Blanton's
because I
killer.
think that's our 200th episode. We are delaying.
Oh, that's right,
the
because
Hoopa Jube for 200.
Oh, that's right, because Hoopa Jube. Oh, well, we can't spoil.
We
that.
can't talk about that.
That's right, secret, folks. But you're gonna love episode 200.
All right,
we'll just say that. But speaking of which, let's slide out of this because Robert has
time
to
for
eventually
Robert to do his magic.
That's right.
So, Francis, your quote was.
Thomas Paine is what we're going back to here. Have to. Oh no, I hate it when that happens. Give me 2 seconds here.
This is the stumbling and bumbling is when Martin and I need to fill in the.
Should we talk about his coffee order this morning?
Well, he really didn't want us to, but can you really call that coffee though?
But I mean, if he's leaving this door open, he needs us to stall till he. Oh, he's found it.
I found it.
Okay,
okay, saved by the
saved by his quick tablet work.
That's correct. Reputation is what men and women think of us. Characters are what God and angels know of us.
Yes.
Thomas Paine.
Thomas Paine. That's correct.
I was going to say his quick finger work, but that's an entirely different thing.
There's a whole other thing.
So yes, reputation is what people think of us. Character is what God and the angels know of us. Yes. Great quote. Great philosophical.
Thank you, sir.
And then right in that he's very much in that same zone as all the other early patriots. They would have thought the very same way.
Right.
So mine is George Washington in a letter to Elbridge Gerry, however it's pronounced. There is nothing so likely to produce peace as to be well prepared to meet an enemy.
Yes. Excellent quote as well. Obviously, we took that in a bunch of different ways.
Right. It threads through a lot of what we are.
Yeah, and of course, we were all pretty agreed on how we wanted to take Francis's quote. So we just explored the depth there. Whereas
mine was pretty straightforward, very deep, and very lot to go with it. But it was really one direction. Whereas Martin's,
we did width with Martin, we did depth with you.
I like that. That's very that's essentially very well done. Yes, that's right.
Well, I am the hammer for a reason. So I got a John Adams quote, and I chose this ahead of time. I actually had a quote, not like before we sat down. I didn't do this like 3 weeks ago or anything. I did this while we were all looking for our quotes, but I chose this immediately. Because I think this is such a great quote. So I'm still going to work it in to touch on you guys. The quotes, not personally.
Well, there are good touches and bad touches.
Right, there are good touches and bad touches. The true source of our suffering has been our timidity. We have been afraid to think. Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write. Let it be known that British liberties are not the grants of princes or parliaments. Now, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, you're going to have to repeat that because that's a long bad boy.
Well, compared to some of the ones you guys have done, that's still short.
I understand, but hey, I'm saying that I'm usually the one that goes long, but we've repeated them.
Yes, we have. Yes. This bears repeating.
Yes.
The true source of our suffering has been our timidity. We have been afraid to think. Let us dare to read, think, speak, and write. Let it be known that British liberties are not the grants of princes or parliaments.
Yeah, you got to zero in on that first piece. I think.
Yes,
everything
the first piece.
Everything is an extrapolation and a flowering of that. the reason for our misery at the time is our timidity.
Well, it's suffering.
Suffering, that's what
suffering. But I take this as a more universal. I think this applies to the human condition at any point in time.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree with that. Please.
So that universality of it, when we suffer. Now, and I take suffering as personal, not imposed suffering as like a conquered nation or somebody in a concentration camp in World War II.
Natural suffering versus unnatural suffering?
Yes. Now, granted, he would have been talking about probably a little bit of both.
That's right, because he's talking about something imposed.
Yes,
because this was a quote from during the Revolution.
Yeah, is. It's tagged with American Revolution.
Yeah,
I don't have a source for where it comes from.
Yeah,
just that it is a John Adams quote.
I think it's fair enough for us to at least run with that.
And it is something that it speaks to me, and I think it speaks probably to all three of us. For a lot of different reasons, because to me it says that the solution to practically any problem we have lies within ourselves. That our strength, that our abilities, our personal ability to think and reason, because we are widely read, widely discussed, educated. This speaks to our education at Bellarmine as a liberal arts. That dare to read, think, and speak and write. That's literally what we do at Snakes and Otters.
Well, you're right about that. Yes.
We have without ever seeing this quote before, we have taken this to heart. And that the second part, let it be known that these British liberties, because he's equating that thinking, speaking, reading, and writing as British liberties. In other words, that ability, that right to be your own man, which I would question whether or not that's actually a British thing, but to be your own man, to be
it's his experience.
A thinking person who has agency.
Oh, there's a good word. Beautiful word. Beautiful word. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yes. It is not the grant of princes or promise. That means it's a
God-given right.
It's a God-given right. Not only a right, it's a God-given responsibility.
I was going to say, the two must be...
they are linked, and this falls on the responsibility side to me. Now...
We're equal because we are, not because Parliament says we are.
Yes, exactly.
Well, which goes back to the inherent, there's the word, inherent dignity and sanctity of all human life.
Yes,
that's the underpinning root from which this is being pulled.
Yes, whether you want to call it that brotherhood of man, which
liberté, égalité, fraternité,
absolutely, absolutely, it is the same root, or whether you want to call it the inherent dignity of the human person. It is all the same thing, expressed in different ways. And when we are not true to that, that is the true source of suffering. Because if you look at human history, not just during the Revolution.
Preach it, brother. Okay.
When you look at all of human history, those who abandon that ideal, that concept.
Core principle,
that core value, that guiding light of your life, if you want to go that deep.
Right.
Those are the ones who are rudderless. Those are the ones who are at the mercy of others. Those are the ones who literally suffer at the whims of the powerful, or at the whims of fickle fate.
Okay, yeah, that's true too.
Because they have no agency.
So, in other words, that's when he says timidity in that quote. That's what he means.
Yes,
it's not.
I think so.
It's not.
That's what I take from.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge expansion from what the word normally means. Because I would take that word as written to be somewhat narrow, but he's meaning it. And I think you're exactly right. He's meaning that far more broadly. It's not just boldness; it's simple engagement.
Yes.
Timidity
is not just...
To use Teddy Roosevelt, in the arena.
Yes, exactly. It's in the arena. Because one who is timid in this context it's not just somebody who's afraid of what might happen. It's somebody who's afraid to act. Someone who gives up their agency.
Disengaged.
Voluntarily.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. There's the magic word, voluntarily.
Yes.
Who gives it up? Who refuses to enter the battle?
Now, and if you want to put it in the context of the time, this would be either the loyalist or the one who just waits to see who's going to win before they decide.
The opportunist.
Yes.
Yeah.
But even an opportunist is probably more is thinking ahead with an eye to their own agency.
They are
in the
engaged.
future.
That's right.
Yes.
It's just a different tactic.
It's a calculated engagement.
As
opposed to
strategically, they're on the same page. They're just going about it differently tactically.
Whereas tactically and strategically, somebody who's given up their agency.
Whereas
they allow life to happen to them rather than them happening to life.
Well, to steal from FDR, the only fear we have is fear itself.
Yes.
That's kind of, when you're speaking of that's what he's talking about, is fear is the real enemy here. It's the only enemy, which that's Sun Tzu, by the way. Here we go again.
Yeah, so there's a lot to be liked in Sun Tzu, yes.
That's right, yes. Martin, you are horribly quiet.
Well, he's really engaging with his mental.
Well, I was going to say, just...
the wheels are turning, and I'm loving it.
Well, I know, because those of us, since this is an audio podcast, listeners, you can't see the pregnant pause and the amazing stupefaction as he processes this marvelous meat that we've given him. This is not pablum we serve today.
Yes,
this is red meat.
No, this is, Give me just the middle piece again.
The let us dare to think, to read, think, speak, and write. That middle?
Yes.
That's the tactics.
Well, actually, the true middle is we have been afraid to think. Let us dare. I love that word, dare.
Let us dare.
That goes back
dare to read.
That's
think,
bold, as in
and
opposite of timidity. That's
yes.
He's playing those two words against
Audacity.
each other oppositionally.
Yes, it is the audacity we spoke of in the last episode.
But it's, the funny audacity to fight. He's talking about just the audacity to live.
Yes.
Well, absolutely. This is broader than just the context of the revolution, when he writes
Exactly.
this.
Exactly. It's much broader than the revolution.
Yeah. I never gave Adams this kind of credit. He was kind of a quick guy, He was
an oddball, to be sure.
And he wasn't super involved in a lot of the writing early on of the Federalist Papers and things like that. He wasn't trying to sell everybody on...
Quick question. Did you guys read McCulloch's Adams?
I have not read all of it. I've skimmed it, but honestly, my knowledge of Adams from that book comes from the miniseries, which, as I understand, was pretty faithful.
Oh yeah, yes, that is. I have it. I have not watched it. It was based on the book.
Yes,
if I'm recalling correct.
Yes.
I have not read that, but the more we spend with Adams, the more I'm thinking, and I think that was kind of what the conversations were at the time the miniseries came out and the book was written, is we have done him a disservice.
We've done a great disservice.
We focused on a couple of idiosyncrasies and missteps that he made later.
Well, and he was a one-term president. He didn't have the impact on the government and the
skipped
forming
over
of the country
too much.
Yes,
and that's what I want to make sure we touch on.
He wasn't quite the dazzler that Hamilton was.
Or Jefferson.
Well, and you're right, because he comes between Washington and Jefferson, two large personalities with two terms that were enormous thought leaders.
Yes.
Yeah, enormous.
Yeah. Well, enormous impact. I mean, Jefferson, with the Louisiana Purchase, is, the impact cannot be understated.
Yeah, doubles the size of the country.
Yeah, more. I think it's more than doubles. Yeah.
And the fun thing about Jefferson is he governed much more closely to Washington
than he did
than he was going to.
Yeah.
He was criticizing Washington in that whole second term, criticizing Adams, but then he ends up governing much more like them.
Yes, because as ideologues will find once they're handed power, maybe those guys had something going for them.
Yeah, there was certainly a reason they governed the way they did, and
yes.
at least deserves some.
And in many ways, it shows the not just the immaturity, but it's somewhat immaturity, because Jefferson is young. Young at the beginning. Obviously, by the time he becomes president, that's 25 years after he's written the Declaration.
Yeah.
or composed it, because he didn't write it in a vacuum. But yeah, it's almost a not immaturity, naivete.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
It's not bad.
naivete.
Either works.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
either
Well,
works.
they often go hand in hand.
Yeah,
right.
so he's very much he's a Winston Smith, Big Brother. I can think two things that are contradictory at the same time and believe them both, almost kind of person.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
that shows his enormous intellect.
Yeah.
Is able to do.
And-
Well, it also shows enormous pragmatism more than anything
Yeah.
else.
Well, yeah.
and
yeah.
Yeah.
Adams has a lot of that pragmatism kind of baked in.
Yeah.
And he's really hard for him to see things in multiple directions and from multiple perspectives. But
Would you call him hard-headed?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I was gonna say,
yeah,
I,
I mean,
yeah,
he's
I
a-
think that's
he's
the
a-
word we're dancing around here.
yeah, Puritan hardhead, kind of guy, Massachusetts hardhead.
Gee, kind of a Scottish type of a
But
Yeah.
but principled.
characteristic. That's
He's
what absolutely.
extremely principled.
Oh, very much
Yeah.
so. Yes, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm kind of niggling
Niggling.
he's
over
putting
here
the
at
needle
Martin a
on
little.
Martin, yeah. But you compare him to somebody like a Burr. No wonder everybody disliked Aaron Burr. I mean,
Right.
all of these people, it was like, oh.
We should remember Aaron
we
Burr for our
can't let-
scumbag
I mean,
episode.
we can't let Aaron Burr near the levers here.
Right.
I mean, Jefferson's one thing, but boy, Burr is in a whole other.
yes.
As much as
And we forget that the system
Adams
was
and
different
him,
than
yeah.
that brought in the vice president.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
not a ticket like
Yeah.
it is now, where
Yeah.
the president is basically picking his number two. No, it's not like that at all. It's the next guy who lost.
Yes.
And
Which, in
Burr-
a way, is a very silly way to go about
And,
business.
and I'll give us as Americans credit. We realize that's maybe not the smartest
yeah, I
thing.
mean
Let's
that was
fix
fixed almost right because basically of Burr.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
Yeah.
fixed
So
because of him.
yes, if we will thank Burr for one thing, that is fixing the vice presidency election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
yeah.
you just imagine that as much as they dislike Jefferson, they're like, well, Jefferson's at least an honorable for what we know so far. But they already knew that, like, Burr was like, wow, he's just,
Wacko.
yeah, I mean, he'll turn on a dime on anything. And
He-
has
he-
no principles at all.
Yeah, I mean, this is before Jackson too, so
Yeah.
who had his own share of that. But
Yeah. So I love that piece there about you're not even really. You got to be brave enough to be a human, and that means you got to think, you got to write, you got to read, and I like his order because he's talking about you're gathering the information, you're
Yes.
synthesizing it in thought, and then you are writing it out,
creating an output, yeah.
creating an output to sharpen.
For somebody
To
else to
sharpen
read,
it, yeah.
you're restarting the cycle.
Yes,
Right. And adding your
yes.
own, and adding your own wisdom into the system
Yes.
Yeah.
to take that and
It's
by
a-
doing so, we as social animals see that as elevating.
Yeah,
The-
it's
the
a
thought.
process of synthesization,
Yeah.
and in the best possible sense. Now, so wonderful quote. Like I said, to me, this is the heart of Snakes and Otters.
Yeah.
Right. This is us. So when we look at this in the context of your quotes, I think this is because remember we're talking about the true source of our suffering is our timidity, right? That inability
Okay,
to act.
yeah.
All right. So, I'll start with Martin because we got his quote on screen.
And Adams in Washington would have experienced that because
Here's what I found.
Congress is essentially frozen.
Yes.
They
yes.
can't make a decision.
They can't make a decision. They can't do anything. They can't. I mean, heck, they even have to. They have to leave Philadelphia. Probably a good portion of which is because they would not act to support Washington. So this whole idea of being able to be well prepared, that implies to me you have done these things.
Mm-hmm.
You have agency. First of all, to be able to prepare, but you have done your thinking, decided what your tactics are going to be, what direction you're going to take. This is the foundation for being able to prepare, to be strong, to have peace that way.
The intellectual process of thinking
Yes.
about.
This is where it all starts.
It's not
Is
just
this
a
not
fight, there has
that
to be-
which defines leadership?
Yep.
It defines leadership when you start talking on the grand scale of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The larger you go.
It's thinking through what's the point of our action. I mean, acting is one thing, but thinking it through and acting on that plan.
Yes.
That's the key.
Exactly. So this has the
considered action.
Yes.
Yeah, as opposed to simply reaction or emotional outbursts,
Right,
or such things like
responding versus reaction.
Right. Yeah.
One is an autonomic, the other is a
considered
action. Yes.
Yeah.
So response is considered, reaction
a
is
function of thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and reason.
So again, is that foundation of being able to prepare to produce peace? That to me, this is the foundation of everything. This is not only the foundation of what is a group oriented statement here from Martin. But we go back to Francis, where reputation is what others think of us and character is what God and the angels know of us.
Right.
So that is a personal philosophy, for lack of a better word. Mm-hmm. This is also the foundation of that. Because this is how we build that character. This is how we become the person that we're going to be. How we become that best version of ourselves, as we now put it. And that's how we build our character. And in building our character, that, at least initially, until, somebody with a malign intent can pervert our reputation. Because initially, reputation is built on our character. What we do. What people see us doing,
because we do, because it's based on output of some sort.
Yes,
and that is a function of character.
This forms our values. That reading, thinking, writing, speaking and writing. This is how we form not just a person, but the values that we hold to be true. Because we have to test them. Right? We test our values. We know as children, our children test the values that we try to imbue in them.
Right.
Constantly. We did that to our parents. It's what every generation deals with with their children.
So it is all a function of output.
No. Because it's a process.
Okay.
There's the input.
Right.
There's the process of the
character.
No. There's the process of internalizing
discernment.
Yes,
and discernment is your way. There's a process of internalizing and presenting, effecting, however you want to put it, which then produces the output.
Okay,
right?
all right.
So
the output is deliberately created and formed.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
If we do not give in to that timidity, absolutely.
I think most people that is probably true.
I don't.
We present that which we wish to present.
No, well, I don't believe that.
Interesting.
I don't believe that in this sense.
Okay, please.
I don't believe that most people think that. Now,
it's not deliberate.
By default, maybe that's true, but honestly, I don't think enough people give any consideration to.
Well, I mean,
what I present is what people will think of me.
Well, yeah, there's very little deliberateness about it, but nevertheless, it's still what you intend. It may be ill-considered or even unconsidered.
Well, I think in this day and age, I think not enough people even think to give that consideration that somebody's going to see this. Because social media practically because almost anything you want to put out there, can become a meme if you're not careful.
Right. Yeah. Everything is seen.
Just about.
Yeah. Yes. In many respects, there is no privacy.
Well, in many ways, everything you've done, anybody's ever done, is seen. Very little, unless it goes back to that foundation of reading and thinking before you speak and write.
Right.
Somebody's going to see. Now, it may only be one person, or two or three others.
Or maybe the FBI when they come.
Or maybe the FBI, or the CIA, or whoever.
Yeah.
Or the Chinese, more likely. Mm-hmm. Listening in on every damn conversation. But somebody somewhere sees it. But the thing is, most of the time we don't think about that.
Right.
Because even when you think about when you're out, and you're with somebody, and you're talking. And, you may say something kind of under your breath, or you'll just say something that is simple, just what you think is a quiet statement. Because you're in your own bubble, you think the only person that heard you is the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
But if we think about things we've heard other people say when we were out and about, that's not really true.
Right.
So yes, everything you do is seen and heard in some way, unless you're alone in a room, and even then, God knows.
Well, yes, right, because we are social creatures.
We're
not necessarily talking about government spying or things like that.
Right.
But it's really more about in our own circle. Everyone knows us, if to some degree,
and even if only by our actions.
That's correct.
And this is where I was going when I was talking about the values.
Yeah.
Because I didn't get a chance to finish that, because we tend to fly off down the rabbit holes.
Well, sure.
Everybody is living out their values all the time. The question is, which value is most important to you at the moment?
Okay.
So, if you've got somebody who 99% of the time is a devoted mother and wife,
okay,
yet 1% of the time, for whatever reason, she goes off and she has an affair. Well, at that moment, the value she's valuing the most, she's living, is that personal fulfillment that she needs. Or he needs, if you want to talk. I only chose a woman because most of the time we think of it as the man. But, they got to cheat with somebody.
Yes, that's true.
So, just for diversity's sake, I chose the female aspect.
All right, yeah.
So, somebody's smacking me right now virtually. It's like, well, come on. But the point is, though, in 99% of their life, maybe they live an incredibly virtuous life, but they have this moment where they fail. Because they choose
the fallen nature of humanity.
Right, it's fallen nature.
Mm-hmm. We sometimes fall. It's not destined for us.
Right.
It's possible for us.
It's possible. It is probable for us.
It's a question of degree.
Well, no, it's probable because unless you die before you hit the age of reason where you can truly decide between what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
More than likely,
you will make mistakes.
We only got 2 people that were ever sinless.
Yes, that's right.
So yes, it is probable. Not necessarily...
It's just a question of what and to what degree.
And when.
When.
Because again, babies are not... They only have the stain of original sin. They don't have personal sin.
Right.
So...
Yeah, you have to be able to understand it in order to choose it.
Right. That's why I say it's probable.
Right.
Maybe you don't sin to the very last moment of your life, but more than likely, the longer you live, you're just racking up quantity, not anything else. But we're kind of getting far afield from where I was going with all this stuff. But,
and we're running at almost an hour and a half. We need to wrap this up.
But again, this timidity, we suffer we give into the timidity when we give into others' wills. Mm-hmm. When we choose, the old saying is, if you don't have a plan for your life, that's okay because somebody else does. Mm-hmm. It's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's think through the risks and respond to the risk accordingly.
Yes,
it's
in many ways we've talked about this kind of thing a lot.
Yes,
that's why I call this quote. I think it's a foundational principle that we had yet to discover. Because it's the first time we've ever talked about this particular quote or ideas. Sometimes the quotes we've brought up, we've talked around before.
Right. I mean, in particular, I know many of mine have been about how do you shake off fear and how do you move, analyzing risk and deciding, okay, I don't like jumping out of airplanes. That's too much of a risk for me. But I can manage to do more than 40 miles an hour on the expressway.
Right. And you'll fly in an airplane.
Yeah.
But you're not leaving it until it hits the ground.
No.
Well, lands. We don't want to talk about hits the ground.
I want wheels.
When
the wheels touch.
Yeah. That's right.
But this not giving in to somebody else's will for your life.
Yeah.
Thinking it through for yourself. Living in that image and likeness of God.
You've
thinking
been
and reasoning.
Given your life, choosing. You should live it.
Yeah. It all comes down to agency.
That's right, and fortunately, at least in this country, we have that ability to a certain degree that others do not, and I think it's important to recognize.
Well, and society always has tried to impose its own version of not just values and morality, because all laws are morality just enacted into
that's
law.
Right. That's
all
right.
of them. I don't care what anybody says.
The entire concept of legislating morality, the entire question is ridiculous because all laws are a legislation of morality.
Exactly. But, so
Of course you can.
there's always somebody who perceives the current morality of society as imposing upon them. And, if you can legitimately push back against that, more power to you.
And in a democracy, you need to only convince 51%.
But you have to think.
You have to think.
Read.
Well, read.
Read.
Very
read.
important.
Read is first.
Get your data.
Yes. Think.
Write.
Speak
and write.
Speak and write. Because, as you put it earlier, you have to form those new, you have to synthesize those new thoughts into words.
Well, yeah, because
that input and that thinking.
As social creatures, you have
argument.
to convince enough people that what you have postulated is of theorized is of merit.
Yeah,
And
we don't do persuasion in the modern world.
Well, a lot of times it's imposition, or at least try.
Well, it's not persuasion.
We do. You don't want to be like that. You want to be like us because we're cool. That's not really persuasion.
Well, it's not even that so much anymore. It's like, you don't want to be like that. You have to be like this.
Yeah. Being like that is
evil.
Out of the norm.
Yeah.
So you got to be like us.
It's taking
taking
the social herd mentality and using it to your to put forth what you wish.
It's this idea of someone who doesn't think like me is an alien. It's such an alien to my experience. We used to not have that. We used to be able to okay, well, you live in the city, I live in the country, we're not that different.
We're more egalitarian.
Yeah, now we're very much like, if you don't live in my neighborhood, I don't even understand you anymore.
Well, I don't think we didn't have that before. I think what it was is just that we were so alike across the entire country in terms of values and norms that were accepted that...
Yeah.
Because if you think about it...
We didn't have to.
Well, we didn't encounter the need to tell somebody, well, you're not like that. You don't want to be like it, you want to be like us. Because, I mean, let's face it. Up until the midpoint of the 20th century, the vast majority of society was pretty similar.
Homogeneous.
Yeah, it's very homogeneous, however you want to put it. And we didn't have huge populations other than the black community, or as we now say, African American community, that was different than the massive norm that was established.
But they weren't as different as we wanted to portray them.
No.
We felt they were alien.
But they weren't.
But they weren't.
But
they
now
had similar values and similar family structures.
And for the most part, people still have similar values, but how we express them have become so radically different.
Well, and all it takes is a superficial difference, color of skin in particular.
And, well, it's color of skin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious identification, whether you're a communist or versus
ideological,
there are so many. But now all of those things that were important before, but now they're life defining, and it's. I think we've gone from we've gone away from this thinking, reading, thinking, writing, speaking, and writing to just reading to writing. In other words, I was like, well, what's wrong with reading and writing? Well, we've gone from the input directly to the output. And what has taken the place...
Sometimes with no input.
Well, sometimes with no input.
Sometimes we're going right to the output.
Confirmation bias.
Cognitive
bias to rule that.
I don't think there's ever an output without an input. But our response, our reaction, is so predefined.
Yeah.
Because we are skipping the writing and speaking, or the thinking and the writing, to get to the speaking. In other words, we're not consciously considering the input before we react.
The input is deliberately narrowed to fit with.
Yes, there is only one way to interpret the input.
That's correct, exactly, and that's confirmation bias. And
it's confirmation bias.
Well, it's just very much. I'm the only thing that matters.
Yes,
whatever I think
it's a
is
form
right.
Of selfishness,
Yeah, it's
versus
very selfish.
selflessness.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I was going to say about Francis's quote earlier that we just went away from. Character is selflessness. Reputation is selfishness in many ways.
That's another conversation. I'm afraid for another day because
we're really pummeling the expired equine here. But I mean,
it's very fruitful. It's very fertile.
Yes.
It's very fecund as we've been using here recently.
So
let's wrap this.
The immediate next is that Francis is going to pan fry us up some steaks that he's been marinating.
Oh yes.
So I'm really looking forward to that because let me tell you, Francis cooks a mean steak.
Absolutely, baby.
That's
right. It's coming here shortly, very much so. We're gonna.
So what's next after that?
Well, we've teased just a little bit on this here. We're going to continue our walk through on the American Revolution. But we're going to go with that stuff that everybody loves, because we know this is what you really like.
Yes.
Scumbags.
Yes.
We're going to talk about the villains because, let's face it, the stories are only as good as the villains that they have.
Yeah.
And the American Revolution has several.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about several of them and why they are the scum that they, of course, ended up being. And ironically, how some of them didn't have to be, but that's what they chose. And we're going to crucify them a little bit next episode. So make sure you're here because this is going to be a great one.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a review. That helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next time.